What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And today we're going to talk about Trae Young trade rumors. Yep, that's right. We're going to talk about Trae Young trade rumors. And, look, before I get started on that particular topic, I want to take this time to tell everyone to subscribe to my channel. Click that subscribe button, like, comment, and keep supporting. Keep supporting my YouTube channel. I want to get my subscribers up, and all that, and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate all the support, and let's just keep this thing going. But without that out of the way, like I said, man, we're gonna talk about this Trae Young trade rumor, whatever, that's been creeping up for the past week and a half or so. And look, for those that haven't been keeping up with the Atlanta Hawks and what they've been going through this season, I'm just gonna keep it a buck. This season, in particular, when it comes to this Atlanta Hawks basketball team, has been a disaster. Right now, they're 24-31. They're just sitting barely inside of the play-in. They're in 10th place in the East. Defensively, you watch this basketball team, they're awful on defense. Every game, they give up 130 plus without even sweating. I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, this season has been a disaster. It's been a disappointment. I thought that this team would be better under Quinn Snyder. I also thought that this team would actually make a move, make a trade, because I thought that this roster wasn't particularly good. Or at least not good, but I mean, at least not, I thought that this roster wasn't like good enough to like contend with the upper teams in the league, i.e. like with the Bostons and the Milwaukees and the Phillies when Embiid was healthy. Like I thought that this roster was going to be upgraded, but nothing happened. And so here we are, 24-31, and recently, as most Hawk fans and really NBA fans, knew, DeJounte Murray was in trade rumors. And for a minute, we thought, oh, DeJounte Murray, like he actually might get traded. He might go. And the Hawks might do something and reshape the team and reshape the roster. And ultimately, nothing happened. DeJounte Murray didn't get moved. Everybody stayed. And nothing happened with the Atlanta Hawks. No move was made. And so you look at that and you think, oh, okay, whatever. I mean, they didn't make a move, whatever. What are we doing? And ironically, a few maybe moments after, DeJounte Murray did not get traded, Trae Young's name pops up. And you had these credible writers like Mark Stein and Jake Fisher and I think Howard Beck, writing articles about, Trae Young could get traded, or teams have talked with the Hawks have left the impression that, Trae Young could be available this summer and, all this stuff. And so, what do I make of all of this stuff that's been coming out, recently when it comes to Trae Young? And I got, a couple of thoughts on the matter. I think number one, if I'm trying to piece two and two together when it comes to the Trae Young stuff, in my opinion, and that's why I think some of this has been out the ether when it comes to Trae, I think a good part of this is tied to DeJounte Murray, in my opinion. I think when the Hawks were shopping DeJounte Murray, I think the Hawks had a little bit of an issue trying to create a market for DeJounte Murray. And if you look at what actually happened with DeJounte Murray when he was on the market. There was really, I mean, you heard some New York, and you heard a little bit of Brooklyn, but really, if we want to be honest, the main team that was really connected to DeJounte Murray was the Lakers. That was the team that most wanted DeJounte. And that was pretty much the only team. You heard a little bit about Brooklyn, but it was really the Lakers. And you look at what the Lakers have to offer, it's Austin Reeves, who they didn't even want to give up. The Lakers don't want to move him. And it's Austin Reeves, and it's D'Angelo Russell, and it's basically a first round pick in 2029. And so if I'm Atlanta and I'm looking at that deal, and I'm looking at the fact that, okay, you're not going to put Austin Reeves in a deal. And look, I don't think Austin Reeves is that attractive, but you look at his contract, you look at his age, you look at the fact that he's averaging 15 a game. Like, okay, like he has some appeal, in particular when it comes to his contract and age. But even with him, he's not really a great fit with Trae. But maybe he could be a nice little asset that you could move to another team, considering his age and his contract and what he can bring offensively. And so if you're not going to include him, and the Lakers are the only team that's interested in DeJounte, like, who else wants DeJounte? And I think Atlanta had a little bit of an issue trying to create a market for DeJounte, especially considering the amount of league guards that are in the NBA right now. Because you look at the NBA, it is deep with guards. There's a lot of quality guards. I mean, you go to the Western Conference, and you just go, it's Anthony Edwards, it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, James Harden, Jamal Murray, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, CJ McCollum, Luka Doncic, De'Aaron Fox, Steph Curry, even some of the bottom teams, even some of the, teams that aren't as good, like Utah, Colin Sexton's been good for them. They're developing this kid, Keontae George, who's their point guard of the future. You look at Houston, you got Fred VanVleet. They drafted this kid, Amen Thompson, who's been, coming out, showing flashes. And so, and that's just in the Western Conference. And then you look at the Eastern Conference, it's, you look at Boston. They got Derek White and Drew Holiday. With Milwaukee, you got Damian Lillard. New York, you got Jalen Brunson. In Philadelphia, you got Tyrese Maxey. Cleveland, you got Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. In Indiana, you got Tyrese Halliburton. Miami, they just gave up a first round pick for Terry Rozier, right? And so, you go down the line. Chicago, Kobe White's been breaking out. He's a real candidate for most improved. He's breaking out. And so you go down the line. Even bad teams like Detroit, Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. And so you look at the league, it's so cluttered with just quality league guards. And so, and I think the issue the Hawks had, and why I think Trae Young's name is kind of coming up, is I think Atlanta at the trade deadline, I think they had an issue trying to create a market for DeJounte. And so when they decided to, okay, they made a decision, we're not going to trade him. And when you look at the league and you look at these executives, and they're thinking, man, they got to break up that backcourt. We know that Trae Young and DeJounte don't work. And I think the league looks at that, and I think they're just wondering, well, they decided to not trade DeJounte Murray. And looking at the market, I think the league just looked at it and just said, Atlanta couldn't get what they want for DeJounte. Okay. Could they move Trae Young? Is it possible? And I think that league scuttlebutt that's kind of out there, you hear his name out there more, and I think you just kind of wonder, like, heading into the offseason, like, what happens if Atlanta shops DeJounte and they don't get what they want for him? What would happen? And look, I think DeJounte's good. I think he's offensively, I think he's been better. I mean, you look at his numbers, he's averaging 21, 5, and 5. And so, like, it's not like this dude is a scrub. Like, he's far from it. Like, look, watching the Hawks, I don't think DeJounte and Trae are a great mesh, but it's not because DeJounte is a bad player. I just think both players are point guards. And DeJounte Murray, the Hawks, I think misevaluated what they thought of him as, like, a defender. And you watch DeJounte and you realize, like, this guy, he's not really what the Hawks thought that they were getting. Like, the Hawks thought that they were getting a guy who can play high-level defense at the point of attack while taking some pressure off Trae. And as it turns out, defensively, he's been not good. And offensively, while I think he's improved as a shooter. You realize, like, with DeJounte, he's better with the ball in his hands. And you just realize he's better when he's running the show with, when Trae's off the floor most of the time. And so it makes for a little bit of a clunky fit. And, look, I've, bring this thing back to Trae. I think the league just looks at that type of stuff, and I just think they're just wondering, like, okay, if they don't love what they're getting, if they don't love the market that's out there for DeJounte, what could that mean for Trae? And I think it's something that I think if I were an executive or a front office team or front office member from an opposing team looking at what Atlanta did at the trade deadline, I would probably wonder, like, okay, like, they tried moving DeJounte. They didn't really get what they want. Now, look, this summer, I think maybe that, there will be more teams that, they look at their season and, look, playoffs and play-in and what happens later in the season, like, that reveals everything. Like, they're teams that you would think they feel good about their team right now. You look forward 3-4 months from now, and they won't feel this good. And you look at the draft picks. There's some teams that they don't have as many picks to offer for DeJounte Murray. And you head in the net, and by the off season, they'll have more to offer. And so, look, man, I don't think DeJounte Murray's trade market is, like, just because Atlanta didn't trade DeJounte at the deadline doesn't mean that I don't think that they probably can't move him this summer because, look, he's a good player and he's on a good contract. I think he's making like $114 million for 4 years coming up. And so, that's basically like what, 6? It's 20, like, I don't have my math right, but I mean, I'm guessing it's like 27 million, something like that for the next 4 years. So, I mean, he's making good money, for the caliber player he is. And so, to me, when I look at the Trae Young trade rumors, I think a good part of it, in my opinion, is tied to what Atlanta didn't do for DeJounte at the trade deadline. Which also brings me to another point when it comes to Trae Young trade rumors. Look, I think the reality is when it comes to Trae is he's the type of dude that, look, he's on a team that's not good. And he's on a team that, you look at where the Hawks have been since the conference finals. They were a play-in team in 2022. They were a play-in team in 2023 last year. And in all likelihood, they're going to be a play-in team this year. And so when teams and executives look at where Atlanta is, you start wondering, okay, when? Like, can we get Trae Young? Is he available? And look, man, teams and executives and fans, we're always looking for that dude who we want to find a way to get off a bad team and put him on a good team. Like it happens all the time. 4 years ago, Devin Booker was that dude. He was the dude that was on a not very good Suns team. Everybody, every fan, including myself as a Hawk fan, was just trying to figure out a way. Can I get this guy on the Atlanta Hawks? Or can you get this guy on such and such, on this team or that team or whatever team? And, as a fan, you start fantasizing this type of stuff. You start going into you start going into the trade machine and you're trying to come up with trades to get guys like Devin Booker on your team. And eventually what, the Suns did, they get Chris Paul 4 years ago. And all of a sudden, those Devin Booker trade fantasies go away. And Devin Booker is not available. You know what happened 2 years ago? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, SGA. Everybody was wondering, man, OKC's rebuilding. They're not winning. They're one of the worst teams in the league. What are they trying to do? And all of a sudden, the following year, the Thunder get better. They become a play-in team. SGA makes first team All-NBA. And you look at what the Thunder are doing this year, they're a top 3 team in the West. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's getting better. And Jalen Williams is one of the better young star wing players in the league. And Chet Holmgren is a top 2 rookie. 7 feet with versatile skills, who can shoot and block shots and finish and do all kinds of things that you don't see many 7-footers do. And all of a sudden, you don't see SGA's, name in the trade rumors anymore. Cat. Cat's one of my favorite players in the league. And, there was a time where, you thought, okay, could you get Cat? Minnesota's been losing since forever. And all of a sudden, could you get Karl Anthony Towns? And to a certain extent, there's probably a decent possibility maybe you could still get him, depending on how, Minnesota's season, turns out. But, that was another guy that you thought that you could get, and all of a sudden, Minnesota starts winning. They land Anthony Edwards, and all of a sudden, last, few, couple years or so, you don't see as many Karl Anthony Towns trade rumors and whatnot. So, you can even go back in time. Kobe Bryant. Way back when, they moved on from Shaq. They traded him to the Heat, and then the Lakers started losing, and not necessarily losing. They had 1 year they didn't make the playoffs, but yet a couple of other seasons where the Lakers were a mediocre team, and they were losing in the first round in the playoffs. Kobe Bryant gets pissed off. He gets fed up. He doesn't think the Lakers are trying to win anymore. He demands to get traded. Ultimately, the Lakers decide not to trade him, and we know the rest. They get Paul Gasol eventually later on during that year. I think that was the 2007, 2008 year. They get Paul Gasol, and lo and behold, the Lakers start winning. They go to the finals for 3 straight years, and they win 2 titles out of those 3 years they went to the finals. And so Paul Pierce, around that same time, the Celtics were losing games, right? They weren't a good team. They were going nowhere. And then all of a sudden, The reports were coming out that maybe the Celtics would trade Paul Pierce, and then that didn't happen. They get Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, and Boston wins a championship, and the rest is history. So I say that to say with Trae that it's like this all the time when it comes to star players. You're losing games. People start speculating that, could he ask out? Could Atlanta trade him? And ultimately, most of the time in these instances, the team figures it out. Some teams figure it out and they get the pieces around that guy and the team starts winning, and all of a sudden the trade buzz goes away. And there are other instances where the situation gets dire and you don't have no other choice but to move set player and start a rebuild or start going in a different direction. And so I think that's the case with Trae, which kind of, look, it brings me to a different question. And it's, the moral of kind of like what this thing is going to be about. Should Atlanta trade Trae Young? And to me, in my opinion, at this point, despite how disappointing this season has been for the Atlanta Hawks and how frustrated as I've been, no, Atlanta should not trade Trae Young. No. Look, I get it. It's been a disappointing year. It's been disappointing. The team isn't very good. Defensively, they're terrible. The results aren't there. But look, man, despite all that, I don't think Atlanta should trade Trae Young. Look, we can nitpick about Trae Young's flaws, or at least his past flaws. Do I think he's been perfect? No. Do I think he's had, at times issues with his maturity? Maybe, probably, early in his career, for sure. But you can't argue that the man is a talented dude. The guy this season's averaging 27 and 10. And he's a three-time All-Star. He's made an All-NBA team. The Hawks have been to the playoffs 3 straight years. And at the end of the day, man, like when you're tanking, when you're trying to rebuild, you look for players like Trae Young. And, look, he's 25 years old. Like a guy who's 25 years old, who's averaging the numbers that Trae Young puts up, and he gives you the production. Like, there's not many dudes in the league who can score, who has the combination of scoring that Trae Young has, while also being an elite level passer. And Trae Young is one of those dudes. Like, Luka is that. Jokic is that. Tyrese Halliburton is that. LeBron, even though LeBron's, old, 39 years old, like, he's that, still that. Like, there's just not many dudes like that. And look, we can debate as far as like where you would rank Trae Young as an overall player. Like, do I think Trae Young is a top 5 or even top 10 player right now today? No, I don't. No, he's not. Like, he's like, as much as I love Trae, I don't consider him to be a top 5 or even 10 player. I just don't. But that doesn't dissuade the fact that the dude is like pretty effing awesome as an offensive player. And look, even defensively, like the Hawks overall as a team on defense has been a flat out joke this season. That's not Trae Young's fault. Like, anyone who's watched the Hawks this season will tell you, like, Trae Young has been putting in real legit effort on that end of the floor. He's up there in the league in deflections and steals. I think he's done a better job of taking charges. Uh, he's sliding his feet, from time to time, like he's doing his best, trying to, when he's guarding this man, he's trying his best to stay in front of him. Like Trae Young defensively this season, like he's brought it in ways that I don't think I've ever seen him bring it in on defense in previous years. Like Trae Young has worked his butt off to become, a serviceable defender this season. Like he's to me, you watch Trae Young this season, and he's bought in on that end of the floor. And so, like, I look at that, and you look at the fact that I do think he is bought in, even if the results of the team hasn't been there, he's bought in. And so I look at that, and look, I do believe, like, eventually, I do believe there's going to come a point in time if the Atlanta Hawks don't retool the roster the right way, and if the team continues, maybe not, heading into next year, like if the team continues to, be what they've been the last 2-3 years, which is a mediocre at best team, like if that continues, then yeah, I do think Atlanta is going to have some hard, tough decisions to make with regards to Trae Young, as well as as well as other guys on the team. Like, there's no question about it. Like, if this thing does not improve moving forward, there will come a point where Atlanta might not have no choice but to trade Trae Young. Like, there's no question about it. Like, he has 2 years left on his deal before he can opt out and become a free agent in 2026. And so, like this is something that, the Hawks are going to have to, like, get serious about trying to upgrade their team. Like, there's no question about it. But I also don't think that time's now when it comes to moving Trae. Like, I just think he's too talented. He's too young. And look, I know I talked about how I think DeJounte Murray's trade market is a little iffy. Like, I get it. I also don't believe that he's impossible to move. Like, if I'm Atlanta heading into the offseason, like, to me, I'm moving on. I'm trying my best to move DeJounte Murray. I'm looking at moving Bogey. I'm definitely looking at moving Clint Capella. Like, Clint Capella, like, his contract is going to expire. So, like, I'm sure there's going to be a team that's going to be looking at taking on his, even if he's not, like, what he used to be. I'm sure there's going to be a team that would be willing to take on his expiring deal. And, like, if I'm Atlanta, I'm looking at, before I'm moving Trae Young or even thinking about it, like, I'm looking at moving DeJounte. I'm looking at moving Bogey. I'm looking at moving Clint. And I'm saying, look, man, like, I think the Hawks need two things on this team. I think they need some legit defenders, perimeter defenders, somebody who can guard at the point of attack. Because defensively, like I said, this team's awful. Like, you got to get some defenders. And I also think they could use some size and some offensive versatility in the front court. Like, I do think they need that. And Jalen Johnson, I think he's had a really nice little breakout season. I still think he can get better. Like, I would like to see him add, a little bit more of a scoring bag. Some counters to his offensive game. Like, we all know he can score in transition. He's improved his jumper. We all know he's a nice little, secondary, playmaker. All of that's good. But I still think there's more that he can do. And don't forget this. Like, Atlanta has their first round pick this season. They could very well have two. Like, they have the Kings pick, that they can use or move. They have their own pick. They have their pick in 2029. And they should coming up. They should have their pick. They should have, a pick in 2031 that they can move. So it's not like the Hawks are just bereft of just not having any assets to improve their team. Like, and so, like, Atlanta can do some things to improve their team, you know. And so, and also, look, this team still has enough interesting young players like Onyeka Okongwu, and I mentioned Jalen Johnson, and you got Trae, you know, you have Kobe Buffkin, who I know he hasn't played this year, but you know I think the Hawks are. I'm sure that Atlanta is still high on this outlook. Long term. I like what he's done in the G League, and look, I know people want to knock the G League and not maybe rookies that don't play in year one, but I've seen rookies that don't contribute in year one come out the woodworks and have a big impact in year two. So it's not crazy to think somebody like a Kobe Buffkin could, break out in year two, despite not playing in year one. So, like, look, man, I think Atlanta has enough there where, they have enough interesting young players that can grow. And they do have some assets that they can move and maneuver around to, eventually upgrade the team. So, I mean, we're not talking about a roster of, like, they don't have, like, nothing. And also keep this in mind. You look at the Eastern Conference. Like, the Eastern Conference, like, you look at where the East is long term. And, like, yeah, Boston, like, they're Boston. Like, Boston long term, they should be there. And I think the Knicks have done a lot of good to, reshape their roster. But are we sure about the Milwaukee Bucks? Like, their team's old. I mean, what happens if they don't get to the finals? You look at their roster. Their roster is outside of Giannis. Their team's old, right? You look at the Miami Heat. They're another team I look at. Jimmy Butler's going to be 35 this year. They're getting, that team is, at least their best players getting old. In Philadelphia, are we sure about Joel Embiid? Are we sure about him? Like, he gets injured every year. At this point, like, he's not, you can't rely on him to stay healthy for a long stretch. And so who's to say that heading into next year that Atlanta, if they, reshape the roster the way that you would think, that they can't get right back in the thick of things in the East. Again, if, they make the right moves. Now, look, man, we can talk about, the front office and ownership and what they haven't done, and all that's fair. And if any Hawk fan don't have faith in the front office and Landry Fields, I don't blame y'all. Like, I totally get it. But when it comes to the Trae Young trade stuff and the rumors, again, like, I don't think Trae Young is a perfect player. And we can debate as far as like whether, like, he's like a true number one option or whatnot, or whatever the case may be. Look, man, I think this dude is pretty damn good. And I think he's one of the rare, dudes that can score at a high level and distribute and pass at a high level. Like, those guys are just not easy to find. And that's not even considering, like, the history of what the Hawks have been when it comes to drafting stars. And so, look, while I do think there's gonna come a point eventually where I think Atlanta, if they don't get it right, that they might have to look into trading Trae Young eventually, just because either he might ask out or Atlanta just might not have enough assets to improve their team. I do think it could come to that point eventually. I also don't think that time is right now, though. And I think if I'm Atlanta, as frustrating as the season has been, trading Trae Young is not the answer. I think they should keep him, and I think they should just move forward and do other things around Trae Young, move other pieces, and try to construct a roster that fits around players, or I don't know, I'm saying around, but fits with your Trae Youngs and your Jalen Johnsons. And so that's the route that I would go. And hey, I mean that's what I got for today. And so, talk soon.